I got on my bike and went back to the house a bit recklessly, shooting through puddles on the path and taking the jump. A bit on the path where there's a long downhill on the dune and then a short uphill where it's easy to leave the ground at a good 40 kilometers per hour, landing with a muddy thump that nearly had me in the wind bushes and left me with a very sore bum, making me want to keep opening my mouth with the feeling of it. But I got back safely. I told my father I was all right and I'd be in for dinner in an hour or so. Then I went back to the shed to wipe gravel down after I'd used the day before. After I'd done that, I'd made up some bombs to replace the ones I'd used the day before, and a few extra besides. I put the old electric fire on in the shed, not so much to warm me as to keep the highly hygroscopic mixture from absorbing moisture out of a damp air. What I'd really like, of course, is not to have to bother with lugging kilo bags of sugar and tins of weed killer back from the town to stuff into electrical conduit piping, which Jamie the dwarf gets for me from the building contractors where he works in Port Neal. With a cellar full of enough cordite to wipe half the island off the map, it doesn't seem a bit daft, but Father won't let me near the stuff. It was his father, Colin Coldham, who got the cordite from the shipbreaking yard. There used to be down the coast. One of his relations worked there and had found some old warship with one magazine still loaded with explosive. Colin bought the cordite and used it to light fires with. Uncontained, cordite makes a very good fire lighter. Colin bought enough to last the house about 200 years, even if his son had continued using it, so perhaps he was thinking of selling it. I know that my father did use it for a while, lighting the stove with it, but he hasn't for a while. God knows how much there still is down there. I've seen great stacks and bales of it still with the Royal Navy markings on it, and I've dreamed up any number of ways of getting at it, but short of tunneling in from the shed and taking the cordite out from the back so that the bales looked untouched from the inside of the cellar, I don't see how I could do it. My father checks the cellar every few weeks, going nervously down with a torch and counting the bales and sniffing and looking at the thermometer and hygrometer. It's nice and cool inside the cellar, not damp, though I guess it can only be just above the water table, and my father seems to know what he's doing and is confident that the explosive hasn't become unstable. But I think he's nervous about it and has been ever since the bomb circle. Guilty again, and that was my fault too, my second murder. The one when I think some of the family started to suspect. If he's that frightened, though, I don't know why he doesn't just throw it out, but I think he's got his own little superstition about the cordite. Something about the link with the past or an evil demon we have lurking, a symbol for all our family's misdeeds, waiting perhaps one day to surprise us. Anyway, I have no access to it, and I have to cart meters of black metal piping back from town and sweat and labor over it. bending it and cutting it, boring it and crimping it, and bending it again, straining with it in the vise until the bench and shed creak with my efforts. I suppose it's a craft in some ways, and certainly it's quite skilled. But I get bored with it sometimes, and only thinking of the use I'll put those little black torpedoes to keeps me heaving and bending away. I tidied everything away and cleaned the shed up after my bomb making activity, then went in for dinner. They're searching for him, my father said suddenly, in between mouthfuls of cabbage and soya chunks. His dark eyes flickered at me like a long city flame. Then he looked down again. I drank some of the beer I had opened. The new batch of homebrew tasted better than the last lot, and stronger. Eric? Yes, Eric. They're looking for him. On the moors. On the moors? They think he might be on the moors. Yes, that would account for them looking for him there. Indeed, my father nodded. Why are you humming? I cleared my throat and kept on eating my burgers, pretending I hadn't heard him properly. I was thinking he'd then spoon some more of the green-brown mixture into his face and chewed for a long time, waiting to hear what he was going to say next. He waved his spoon slackly, pointed it vaguely upstairs, then said, How long would you say the flex on the telephone is? Loose or stretched? I said quickly, putting down my glass of beer. He grunted and said nothing else, going back to his plate of food, apparently satisfied if not pleased. I drank. Is there anything special you'd like me to order from the town? He said eventually, as he rinsed his mouth with real orange juice. I shook my head and drank my beer. No, just the usual, I shrugged. Instant potatoes and beef burgers and sugar and mince pies and cornflakes and junk like that, I suppose. My father sneered slightly, though it was said evenly enough. I nodded. Yes, that'll do fine. You know my likes. You don't eat properly. I should have been more strict with you. I didn't say anything, but kept on eating slowly. I could tell that my father was looking at me from the other end of the table, swilling his juice around in his glass, staring at my head as I bent over my plate. He shook his head, got up from the table, taking his plate to the sink to rinse it. Are you going out tonight? He asked, turning the tap. No, I'll stay in tonight. Go out tomorrow night. I hope you won't be getting steaming drunk again. You'll be arrested some night, and then where will we be? He looked at me. Eh? I don't go getting steaming drunk, I assured him. I just have a drink or two and be sociable, that's all. Well, you're very noisy when you come back for somebody who's only been sociable, so you are. He looked at me darkly again and sat down. I shrugged. Of course I get drunk, but what the hell's the point of drinking if you don't get drunk? But I'm careful. I don't want to cause any complications. Well, just be careful then. I always know how much you've had from your farts, he snorted, as though imitating one. My father has a theory about the link between mind and bowel being both crucial and very direct. It's another of his ideas which he keeps trying to interest people in. He has a manuscript on the subject, The State of the Fart, which he also sends away to London to publishers now and again, to which of course they send back by return. He has variously claimed that from farts he can tell not only what people have eaten or drunk, but also the sort of person they are, what they ought to eat, whether they are emotionally unstable or upset, whether they're keeping secrets, laughing at you behind your back, or trying to ingratiate themselves with you. And even that, and even what they are thinking about at the precise moment when they issue the fart. This largely from the sound. All totals, nonsense. I said, non-committal to a fault. Oh, I can, he said as I finished my meal. Oh, I can, he said as I finished my meal and leaned back, wiping my mouth on the back of my hand. More to annoy him than anything else, he kept nodding. I know when you've had heavy or lager, and I've smelt Guinness off you too. I don't drink Guinness, I lied, secretly impressed. I'm afraid of getting athlete's throat. This witticism was lost on him apparently, for without a pause he continued. It's just money down the drain. Just money down the drain, you know. Don't expect me to finance your alcoholism. Oh, you're being silly, I said, and stood up. I know what I'm talking about. I've seen better men than you think they could handle the drink and end up in the gutter with a bottle of fortified wine. This is the last sally. If that last sally was intended to go below the belt, it failed. The better men than you line was worked out a long time ago. Well, it's my life, isn't it? I said, and putting my plate in the sink, left the kitchen. My father said nothing. That night I watched the television and did some paperwork, amending the maps to include the newly named Black Destroyer Hill, writing a brief description of what I'd done to the rabbits, logging both the effects of the bombs I'd used and the manufacturer of the latest batch. I determined to keep the Polaroid with the war bag in future. For low-risk, punitive expeditions like that against the rabbits, it would be more than repay the extra weight and amount of time consumed using it. Of course, for serious delivery, the war bag has to go by itself, and the camera would just be a liability, but I haven't had a real threat for a couple of years since the time some big boys in town took to bullying me in Port Neal and ambushing me on the path. I thought things were going to get pretty heavy for a while, but they never did. They never did escalate the way I thought they might. I threatened them with a knife once after they stopped me on my bike and started pushing me around and demanding money. They backed off that time, but a few days later they tried to invade the island. I held them off with steelies and stones, and they fired back with air guns, and for a while it was quite exciting, but then Mrs. Clamp came with the weekly messages and threatened to call the police, and after calling her a few nasty names, they left. I started the cache system then, building up supplies of steely stones, bolts, lead fishing weights, buried in plastic bags and boxes at strategic points around the island. I also set up snares and tripwires linked to glass bottles in the grass on the dunes over the creek, so that if anybody tried to sneak up, they would either catch themselves on the snag wire, pulling the bottle out of its hole and the sand down on the stone. I sat up for the next few nights, my head poking out of the back skylight of the loft, my ears straining for the tinkle of glass breaking or muffled curses, or the more usual signal of the birds being disturbed and taking flight, but nothing more happened. I just avoided the boys in town for a while, only going in with my father or at times when I knew they would be in school. The cache system survives, and I've even added a couple of petrol bombs to one or two of the secret stores where a likely avenue of attack comes in over terrain the bottles would smash on. But the tripwires I've dismantled and left in the shed. My defense manual, which contains things like maps of the island with the caches marked like attack routes, a summary of tactics, a list of weapons I have or might make, includes within this last category quite a few unpleasant things like tripwires, snares, set a body length away from a concealed broken bottle sticking up in the grass, electrically detonated mines made from pipe bombs, small nails, all buried in the sand, and a few interesting, if unlikely, secret weapons like frisbees with razors embedded in the edge. Now that I want to, not that I want to kill anybody now, but it is all for defense rather than offense, and it does make me feel a lot more secure. Soon I'll have enough money for a really powerful crossbow, and that I'm certainly looking forward to it. It'll help me make up for the fact that I've never been able to persuade my father to buy a rifle or shotgun that I could use sometimes. I have my catapults and slings and air rifle, and they could all be lethal in the right circumstances, but they just don't have the long-range hitting power I really hanker after. The pipe bombs are the same. They have to be placed or at best thrown at the right target or at the target. And even slinging some of the purpose-built smaller ones is inaccurate and slow. I can imagine some unpleasant things happening with the sling too. The sling bombs have to be on a pretty short fuse if they're to detonate soon enough after they land not to be thrown backable. And I've had a couple of close calls already when they've gone off just after they left the sling. I've experimented with guns, of course, both mere projectile weapons and mortars, which would lob the sling bombs, but they have all been clumsy, dangerous, slow, and rather prone to blowing up. A shotgun would be ideal, though I'd settle for a .22 rifle, but a crossbow will just have to do. Perhaps sometime I'll be able to devise a way round my official non-existence and apply for a gun myself, though even then, all things considered, I might not be granted a license. Oh, to be in America, I occasionally think. I was logging the cache petrol bombs which hadn't been inspected for evaporation recently, and the phone went. I looked at my watch, surprised at the lateness of the hour, nearly 11. I ran downstairs to the phone, hearing my father coming to the door of his room as I passed it. Port Neal 531, Pip sounded. Fuck it, Frank. I've got Luna Maria Colossus on me feet. How the hell are you, me young bucko? I looked at the handset, then at my father, who was leaning over the rail from the floor above, tucking his pajama top into his trousers. I spoke into the phone. Hello there, Jamie. What are you doing calling this late? What? Oh, the old man's... There is he, Eric said. Tell him he's a bag of effervescent pus from me. Jamie sends his regards, I called up to my father, who turned without a word and went back to his room. I heard the door close. I turned back to the phone. Eric, where are you this time? Ah, shit, I'm not telling you. Guess. Well, I don't know. Glasgow? Ha ha, Eric cackled. I clenched plastic. How are you? Are you all right? I'm fine. How are you? Great. Look, how are you eating? Have you gotten any money? Are you hitching lifts or what? They're looking for you, but there hasn't been anything on the news yet. You haven't, I suppose. Not even on the thing. You haven't. I stopped before I said something he might take exception to. I'm doing fine. I eat dogs. I groaned. Oh, God, you're not really, are you? What else can I eat? It's great, Frankie boy. I'm keeping to the fields and woods and walking a lot and getting lifts, and when I get near a town, I look for a good, fat, juicy dog, and I'll make friends with it and take it out to the woods, and then I kill and eat it. What could be simpler? I do love the outdoor life. You are cooking them, aren't you? Of course I'm fucking cooking them, Eric said indignantly. What do you think I am? Is that all you're eating? No, I steal things, shoplift. It's so easy. I steal things I can't eat just for the hell of it, like tampons and plastic dustbin liners and party-sized packets of crisps and 100 cocktail sticks and 12 cake candles in various colors and photograph frames and steering wheel covers in simulated leather and towel holders, fabric softeners, and double action air fresheners to waft away those lingering kitchen smells, and cute little boxes for awkward odds and ends, and packs of cassettes and lockable petrol caps, and record cleaners and telephone indexes, slimming magazines, pot holders, packs of name labels, artificial eyelashes, makeup, boxes, anti-smoking mixture, toy watches. Don't you like crisps? I broke in quickly. He sounded confused. I mentioned party-sized packets of crisps as being something I couldn't eat. Or as being something you couldn't eat. For Christ's sakes, Frank, you couldn't eat a party-sized packet of crisps. And how are you keeping? I said quickly. I mean, you must be sleeping rough. Aren't you catching cold or something? I'm not sleeping. You're not sleeping? Of course not. You don't have to sleep. That's just something they tell you to keep control over you. Nobody has to sleep. You're taught to sleep when you're a kid. If you're really determined, you can get over it. I've got over the need to sleep. I never sleep now. That's why it's a lot easier to keep watch and make sure they don't creep up on you. And you can keep going as well. Nothing like keeping going. You become like a ship. Like a ship? Now I was confused. Stop repeating everything I say, Frank. I heard him, but more money into the box. I'll teach you how not to sleep when I get back. Thanks. When do you expect to get here? Sooner or later. Look, Eric, why are you eating dogs if you can steal all that stuff? I've already told you, you idiot. You can't eat any of that crap. But then why not steal stuff you can eat? Don't steal stuff you can't, and don't bother with the dogs, I suggested. I already knew it wasn't a good idea. I could hear the tone in my voice rising higher and higher as I spoke the sentence, and that was always a sign I was getting into some sort of verbal mess. Eric shouted, "Are you crazy? What's the matter with you? What's the point of that? These dogs, aren't they? Oh, What's the point of that? These are dogs, aren't they? Isn't as though I'm killing cats or field mice or goldfish or anything. I'm talking about dogs, you rabid dingbat. Dogs. You don't have to shout at me, I said evenly through, starting to get my angry self. I was only asking why you waste so much time stealing stuff you can't eat, then waste more time stealing dogs when you could steal and eat the same time at the same time, as it were. As it were, as it were. What the hell are you gibbering about? Eric yelled, this strangled voice hoarse and contralto. Oh, don't start screaming, I moaned, putting my other hand over my forehead and through the hair, closing my eyes. I'll scream if I want to, Eric screamed. And I do think I'm doing all... And what do you think I'm doing this all for? Eh? What the hell do you think I'm doing all this? These dogs, you